join everybody today. I'm going to do a PowerPoint so you don't have to look at me. So I'll put this up here. And the focus is really, and I hope this isn't too basic, but I just think they're lessons we often forget, and it's something we always struggle with, which is how do we get more people active in our communities? I've been doing community work now for all my life, as an activist, as a community organizer, working in local government, working, teaching at the University of Washington. And what I challenge always, whether you're in an agency or whether you're in the community, is how do we get everybody engaged? So it's not community, if it's just a few people. Community is really everybody. And particularly, how do we get inclusive engagement and get all parts of the community engaged? So I just wanted to share the lessons I've learned. These are the lessons I share when I travel. But I tell you, every place I go, and particularly in Australia and New Zealand, I just learned so much. I've learned so much more than I give. So I'm going to share some examples as well that illustrate some of the lessons. And the examples will be from my own community, but from other places as well. Okay? So, so the first lesson I learned, a friend of mine said, you know, the problem getting people involved in community are those GD activists. And I said, GD, what are you talking about? And he said, the grim and determined. And it cracked me up because it describes so many of the community activists I know in Seattle who are always negative. They just like to complain all the time. And some people gravitate to that negativity, but most people get involved because they have a sense of hope that they can make change. It's like, why would you get involved if you don't think you can make any change? So in many ways, those GD activists become the gatekeepers and keep everybody else away. So I have another friend who says, why have a meeting when you can have a party? You know, think about it. The purpose isn't who can endure the most suffering. The purpose is to build relationships. That's what community is all about. And it's much easier to build community through fun than it is through meetings. And yet we always resort to meetings. So the first lesson, have fun. So I got a couple examples. One is from our neighboring city, Tacoma. This is Tacoma. Tacoma was having a hard time. It's been boarded up. The downtown was pretty desolate for many years. But more and more people started to live downtown. Businesses started to come alive, but it was still not pedestrian friendly. There were no crosswalks. People felt really unsafe walking around. They wrote letters to the council. They made phone calls. Nothing happened. Well, they got tired that instead of just going through the city's process, which is really designed to wear down community, they said, we're going to take matters into our own hands. And they just started painting crosswalks in the middle of the night. More and more crosswalks showed up. The city was not happy about this, and they used pressure washers, and they took out the crosswalks. But the next night, even more crosswalks showed up. The council was really upset. So they said, we've got an ordinance against this. We're going to fine you if you paint more crosswalks. So they decided not to paint any more crosswalks. They just did checkerboards. They did polka dots. And finally, the council gave up and they called a meeting downtown and said, what are we going to do about pedestrian safety? And they put up $500,000 for pedestrian improvements downtown Tacoma. And people in the community just had a great time doing this. And it got a lot of people engaged, many more than if they just had a lot of meetings, whether they just done petitions. So a key to change, I think, is having fun, lightening up a little bit. This is where I live on Vashon Island. Again, about 10,000 people. And we're trying to get people to think about how they could lead more healthy lives, how they could get into fitness. We realized a lot of people had exercise bicycles in their basements that they had used for years. So we encouraged people to put them on the beach. And now people are on the beach, exercising together, just having a great time. So much more fun than sitting in the basement by yourself on an exercise bicycle. Try to figure out how to get people into good nutrition, how to make good eating sexy. So we went to the local farmers market, and you know, how do you make good nutrition sexy? Well, you put up a vegetable peep show. And this is what it looks like when you look inside. So just having a great time, you know, and having fun gets people's attention, gets people engaged. Second lesson I learned about getting people engaged is the importance of starting where people are. I'm an old Saul Alinsky organizer. and he talks about the importance of starting where people are at. There's several levels to that. One is the closer you involve people to where they actually live, the more likely they are to get engaged. So you may get more people out Seattle-wide than you would in a particular neighborhood. You may get more people out in that neighborhood than you would on your street, but you're never going to get as high a participation than if you involve people on the street where they live. Because, you know, if it's citywide, people are going to say, hey, I don't need to show up, because somebody else will show up, right? Childcare is easier. Transportation isn't a worry if it's right in your own street. So you get a much higher percentage of participation to involve people right where they live. So here's some examples. I think typically when we've done block work, at least in the States, and I think it's true with neighborhood watch too, it tends to be done by the police department. And we're organizing people for surveillance, to watch out for strangers. That's one way to organize people at the block level. But I found that the safest blocks are the ones that don't focus on safety. They focus on what's important to the neighbors. And the more you get the neighbors interested in what they care about, the more people participate and the safer you are. So the safest blocks aren't the ones that focus on safety. They focus on what's important to the neighbors. So in New Zealand, you know, they have neighborhood support areas. The idea is to really, how do we use the block as a way to do mutual aid, to support latchkey kids, to support housebound seniors, to support one another. In Rotterdam, large refugee community, there was one block there called the Obzumer Street. Neighbors kept meeting with the local council and complained because they said, we got safety problems, we got a problem with cleanliness of our street. And they had meeting after meeting after meeting, and the council didn't do a damn thing. So finally, the community got fed up and said, look, we're spending all our time trying to get the council to do this. We're actually in a better position to ensure safety and cleanliness ourselves. Why don't we just do it ourselves? So they self-organized, and they used that block as a way to keep their street clean, to keep it safe, but they also used it as a way to teach each other Dutch. They used it as a way to support housebound seniors, and they had all kinds of activities to create a stronger sense of community. This created a movement. There are now over 2,000 blocks organized in Rotterdam that is self-organized as part of the Obzumeren movement. If you have at least 4 events a year, you get this sign up in your block that shows you're part of the movement. But one of the coolest things they do is they bring all the neighbors together on their street and have a discussion about what are the values by which we're going to live together on this street. And once they agree on their values, shared values, they put up a sign that reminds each other about the values that they've agreed to live by as neighbors. I forget my Dutch, but this sign says something like, we're going to welcome people onto our block, we're going to watch out for the children, we're going to keep the front of our houses clean, that kind of thing. But the signs are different on each block because people come up with their own statement of values. This is in Edmonton, Alberta, where the local government sponsors a program in which they train people how to be block connectors. Neighbors would go out and have conversations with their neighbors to find out what their interests are, what their gifts are, how they'd like to be involved, what they need. And then they connect people with shared interests. And that's just a fantastic way to build a strong sense of community. This model is now being used all over. It's used in some neighborhoods in Seattle, but all over Canada. This is where I live on Vashon Island. We are very susceptible to earthquakes here. So we've organized our community to 200 neighborhoods and have trained people in each of these 200 neighborhoods how to respond to emergencies. And they've organized their neighbors to identify who's got the emergency equipment, who's got the skills. So, and we have regular practices because we're always having trees that come down and knock out all our power. So it's just been a great way for neighbors to connect with each other. And now we're using it to respond to COVID-19. Neighbors are checking up on neighbors who need help and support, and people have already built the relationships, so they know who needs that support. Block parties are a great way to bring neighbors together. In the UK, they have a big lunch every year where all the neighbors throughout the whole country are having lunch together, but all on their own streets. And now they've blocking streets so that they can have playtime together on their streets, like we used to, where kids just can go out in the street and play safely. And this is a model that's being taken up in many places now, in Vancouver, BC, Toronto, BC, all over. Waterloo, Ontario, I was there, and everybody had front porches on their houses. So they had front porch concerts. I was there one afternoon, they had 44 concerts on 22 porches. And all the neighbors just came and sat on the lawn, went from lawn to lawn, listened to music. Different kinds of music in every yard, but it was a great way to connect the neighbors. Little free libraries popping up everywhere I go. And now little free pantries. This is one on Vashon Island that popped up with the COVID-19. Wedgwood neighborhood, where a mother and her son are taking a wagon through the streets and sharing magazines with people in their homes. And then when people take a magazine, they leave their own leftover magazines. So it's a great way to recycle materials and a great way to connect neighbors. So here's just a partial list of all the things you could do on your block. And I tell you, the more people are connected, not only are you safer, but you are healthier, you're more resilient. There's all kinds of, you're more caring, all kinds of advantages of bringing people together around their agenda at the local level, rather than just around a narrow crime prevention agenda. Second key to starting where people are is to start with their bumping place. We often call those community gathering places, but I like to call them bumping places because that's what community is all about. Community is all about building relationships. And you build relationships by bumping into the same people over and over and over again. So if you want to build community, you need places to bump into other people. And the closer those bumping places are to where you live, the more likely you are to bump into the same people over and over and over again. So you need places like the coffee shop, the pub, places where you bump into other people. If you don't have them, you need to create them. So this is one of our neighborhoods in Seattle that was having a huge crime problem. On a vacant lot, they said, why don't, instead of just having this lot be a place that keeps everybody away, why don't we make it a place that attracts everybody? And so they put a community garden there. That's really taking care of the crime problem, but it's also built a strong sense of community. This is in a small village in Taiwan where they had no bumping place. So everybody put the bumping space in their front yard. And they built little parks in everybody's front yard, and neighbors get together at night and eat together. They play games together. Just really creative ways of creating bumping spaces. This is the Sellwood neighborhood of Courtland. They're trying to figure out how to create a bumping place and how to slow down the traffic because the only bumping that was happening was cars. So without asking any permission from government, they just painted a mural in their intersection. And it's worked great. It slows down the traffic, creates a sense of pride. It's been so successful that now the city permits it. But it's taken all the fun out of it. Now you have to do application forms and all that. But then they created street furniture coming out from this mural, and they have a cob bench. They've got a tea station. People take turns every morning filling up the teapot, and so neighbors can come together and drink tea together in the morning. This is another neighborhood in Portland that had no bumping place, but somebody had no van. So artists painted the van. They created wings for the van. The van pulls into the neighborhood, and the neighbors erect the wings on the van. And inside the van are card tables and chairs that they set up underneath the wings. And they also have the capacity to make tea in this van. They call it the tea horse. And they serve tea to all the neighbors. And as the neighbors are drinking tea, they talk about what they can do to make their block a better place. The advantage of bumping places is that people tend to hang out in different bumping places, different kinds of people in different places. And so if we really want to reach people, we need to figure out where do they bump, where do they hang out, and go to them rather than always trying to get people to come to us. That's a key to engaging more inclusive community. So I'm involved with a group called the Backbone Campaign here on Vashon Island that's been concerned about the issue of racism. We went to downtown Seattle and erected a gigantic inflatable elephant in the Westlake Mall, which is the big open space downtown, big bumping space. And we put living room furniture around that elephant. And we invited people as they were on their way to shop or to work to sit down on the sofa and talk about racism. And it attracted people who would never, ever, ever come to a workshop on racism. So powerful to go where the people are rather than always trying to get the people to come to us. Third part of starting where people are is to start with their language and culture. Too oftentimes we start with our language, with our professional language. We use terms like asset-based community development to explain something that's really simple, which is building on our strengths. And if people don't know what we're talking about, they aren't going to get engaged. They don't think they have enough expertise. They don't even know what the topic is. So we need to speak the language of the people, particularly the environmental movement drives me crazy talking about peak oil, transition towns, resilience. People don't know what the hell we're talking about. We need to speak the language of the people and also start with their culture and be cognizant of where they're at with their culture. When I lived in Seattle, I lived in a very, oh my God, 5 minutes? I'm going to go really fast now. We had a very multicultural community, the most multicultural community in the country, but we had a hard time connecting. That was our strength, all these different cultures, but we spoke different languages. So we realized that one of the things we all had in common is we all loved to dance. So we organized a world dance party. And the first dance party, we had people show up from 12 different cultures teaching each other their dance and just had the best time. And people were there from absolutely every age group, from this older woman to this little girl. She was our DJ. We had so much fun that now we do this all the time. And we're always learning new kinds of dance. And it builds community because we start with people's cultures. We start where they're at rather than always starting with their own agenda. Fourth is starting with their networks. So oftentimes we're trying to get everybody to join our group. And then when people don't join our group, we say, God, people are apathetic. What we fail to recognize is just about everybody's already organized. They just don't belong to our group. And it's hard to get the diversity of people, inclusion in one group. We try, but the language has already been set. The leadership is set. The relationships are set. The agenda is set. So people who are different don't feel that comfortable coming in. So if we really want to be inclusive, we need to reach out and say who's underrepresented in our organization and what network are they a part of, and reach out to their networks and start creating a network of networks. We're now doing that on Vashon Island. We're creating a community council, not by creating yet another organization, but by creating an organization of organizations. And then fifth, to start with their passion. So oftentimes we lead with what we're passionate about or what we get paid to be passionate about. And then when nobody joins us, we say people are apathetic. Nobody's apathetic. Everybody cares deeply about something. So much better to start with a question than with an answer. What keeps you awake at night? What are your dreams for your community? If we can tap into what people care most deeply about, give them a sense they can do something about it, they'll actually get engaged. They won't get engaged if we just spend all our time trying to engage them around what we care about. I'm going to skip over this because I got a lot more to cover here. This is probably the most important one, which is don't sit on your assets. And the point here is that absolutely everybody has gifts to give to our community. The three kinds of gifts: gifts of the head, their knowledge; gifts of the heart, their passions; gifts of the hands, their skills. And that's the basis for engaging people in community. Community is all about sharing our gifts with one another. But what we've done in our society is we have labeled most people in our community not by their gifts, but by what they are missing. We've labeled people by their deficiencies with terms like unemployed, poor person, non-English speaking, single parent, addict, offender, disabled, old person, at-risk youth, homeless. And when we do that, we're basically denying their gifts. And we're treating them as clients rather than as citizens. Because gift giving is the basis of community. We wonder why all these individuals aren't active in our communities, because we have defined them out of community. We have defined them as clients rather than as citizens. So if we really want to bring everybody into our community, we need to identify their gifts and welcome their gifts. This is my friend Damon Lynch, minister at church in Cincinnati, Ohio, had a soup kitchen for homeless men. Finally, somebody woke up and said, let's interview these men, find out what their gifts are. Turns out a lot of these men like to cook. They said, would you like to help cook the meals in the soup kitchen? They were overjoyed. Nobody ever thought to ask them that before. After a while, the members of the church and the homeless people are cooking and eating together. And it was kind of hard to tell who were the providers and who were the clients, because it wasn't about services anymore. It was about community. That's the meaning of community, recognizing every one of us has needs and every one of us has gifts, and it's about meeting each other's needs with each other's gifts. And finally, the importance of leading by stepping back. That so many of us complain that we're doing all the work. Nobody's stepping up to help us. We often fail to recognize that we're our own worst enemy. That we fail to welcome other people's gifts. That we fail to let go of anything because nobody else can do it quite as well as we can. So if we really want to develop strong organizations, we need to move towards more collective leadership. Realize no one has all the gifts to be a good leader. Somebody's a good talker, somebody's a good facilitator, somebody's a good welcomer, somebody makes a great pie that will get people to come. We need all those gifts in order to have an effective organization. So the importance of following the iron rule of community organizing, which is never do for people what they can do for themselves. And if we're really effective in building an organization and we're effective leaders, this is what, when the best leaders' work is done, the people will say, we did it ourselves. If it just one person can take credit for it or just a handful of people, it's not community. Community is when everybody's engaged and everybody feels some ownership of the results. Phew, that's it. This is my website. So all the stuff I skipped through still is on my website. If you want to go there, there's a lot of clips. There's blogs. My email's on there. My phone number's on there if you want to get in touch. Yeah, so that's it. Phew.